We move on to our next panel discussion, and it's a very pertinent topic, especially relevant for the manufacturing infrastructure segment. We touched upon now a lot of these IoT deployment in many cases we see with increasingly manufacturing and infrastructure organizations going for IoT deployment. The problem we see is the level of awareness about IT security obviously has increased, and we have seen it since morning. But OT security, the OT security is purely in the production environment. So IT part is fine, but in a manufacturing setup, we are talking about the production environment, the real factories. So the production environment, the OT, the operational technology, that OT security is still not matching to the level of the IT security. And as a result of that mismatch, a lot of these IoT deployments are failing. So discussing the future of OT security, marrying IT and OT successfully for IoT deployment. We have with us already on the dais, Mr. R.N. Patra is a Chief Manager ENT from Coal India, one of the largest PSUs of the country. We have with us Mr. Kripaduti Sarkar, CIO Ambuja Neotia. We have with us Mr. Sriram Chavali, CIO Bamal Lorry. And we have with us Mr. Manik Paul, CIO of Vikram Solar. When we are talking about the OT environment, typically in the production environment and OT security we are talking about, how as an organization you are looking at building sort of cybersecurity resilience across the OT environment?
Good afternoon, all the delegates. Good afternoon, Mr. Rajneesh, and the panelists on the dais. Regarding this session on the marrying IT and OT, so science says if you have a good partner in marriage, then you are successful in life. Even Washington University have a study on it, and they found that those peoples have prudent and a good life partner, they are more efficient in their work. Similarly, when we are deploying IT with OT, both should be properly handshaked, mutually compatible, then they can give you the better performance as well as better security. What Rajneesh told regarding the OT security, definitely there are a lot of challenges in the OT security. And when you are deploying some IT devices with OT like sensors and all these things, and when the sensors are being deployed in a legacy system, so there are a lot of challenges as the legacy system may not be able to cope with the latest firmware, software, something like that. So in OT, my experience or suggestion is that you have to deploy layered security. That means each and every layer you have to identify where the risk is involved, and you have to deploy the security according to a risk. And when these data are transmitted from OT or IT to your database, each and every gateway should have a secure devices, and you should have a visibility over your IT and OT. In OT, mostly the awareness of the operators or awareness of the peoples is very much important, because whatever the data are being generated from the sensors or IT, and that is matched with the OT for the operations, there is a lot of vulnerability or risk factor is involved. So awareness of the operator, people, and the layer security is much more important.
Okay, great. Thank you for your opening remarks, Mr. R.N. Patra of Coal India. I'll come to you, Mr. Kripaduti Sarkar of Ambuja Neotia. We talked about the basic premise or the fundamental principle of this discussion is how do you build the synergy between your IT security level and OT security level? What are your recommendations?
I'm starting, thank you, good afternoon and thank you. So I'm starting with take context that previously the shop floor owned by the product manager or product lead or technology leaders. So no way IT has an intervention or any influence on the policy making on that floor. So therefore, all the instruments, SCADAs, all the data they are operating with, they are taking the notes on the pen and paper, and then finally it's submitted to MIS to the IT department. So it's a transmission, manual transmission. So nowadays, within last 2 decades, so slowly wherever there is a generation of the data, management also understand that that data has to be secured. So they understand that it's not handed over manually like a answer script to somebody somewhere. So that point of time, actually the influence of the IT head or the CIO or CTO on the shop floor or those SCADA machines on the data established. So by virtue of that, and it's actually a boom for us because we are just managing with that legacy that we did not to fight with the shop floor manager or the product manager that I have to intervene on this data security, because we already our earlier generations, the last 10 years, they fought for it and they won the battle. So now what, as you rightly pointed out, so whenever we marrying that IT and OT, so the ground is already set up. So now whenever we draft a policy for the data security, it complies IT devices, end user, as well as the all OT devices also. So it's not like 10 years or 20 years ago where OT devices are only shop floor manager has a authority to do the policy on that.
But here, if I may ask, the shop floor manager, rightly as you mentioned, but primarily even now, for many of the, if may not be for the large, but the mid-sized manufacturing and engineering organizations, the production environment and the legacy still rests with the shop floor manager.
True.
So how is that?
That is where I'm coming to that. So therefore, so whenever it's a management committee where we are placing that all the security models or the policies related to that data security and the cyber security, it's generic. It's a standard, and the CIO has ownership on that. It's a signing authority, but certainly take inputs from the shop floor manager. So therefore, now shop floor manager under the influence of the CIO. Previously is the reverse, so it's the role changed. So therefore we have an influence on that because management hears CIOs on the data security. So therefore, and now coming back to how they're marrying together or how they work together, how we do. So whenever we draft policy, we are actually making section for the shop floor also, so for the OT also. So therefore, it's a single policy having both the entity, both the policies together. So manageability on the manageability concern, like I'm just giving incident management. There is some incident, so it's managed by a single team operating on a same SOP. Only thing is the operational difference. So it's like in a medical science, somebody is orthopedic, somebody is a child specialist, but both dealing with the same human as a patient.
Exactly. Great. Lovely analogy. I'll come to Sriram Chavali from Bamal Lodi, and I'll come straight to the manufacturing level questions. How are you protecting the industrial controls and the SCADA systems typically in the operational environment?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Sriram. I'm from Bamal Lodi and Company Limited. See, these SCADA systems and all, they're all control systems which have remote connectivity and all. They normally will have. So in the earlier days, what used to happen is that they used to be isolated, as he's mentioning. They're isolated systems. Now, as the IT and OT getting married and the data transfers and are happening, so many times people, what they try to do is they try to connect these systems, with the IT networks and all. So when they're connecting them, then what will happen is the IT systems are more secure because there is an awareness there one step ahead. Whereas the operational technology wise, these devices are one step behind for many reasons. Say, for example, if you take the operating systems of these systems, they may not be up to date. They may be old ones. The fear here or the problem here is that if I want to upgrade the operating system, I have to shut down my operations, and it is going to be a huge loss. So there are various factors for which they are not being upgraded. Also, the OEMs, they do not, these were procured at the time when the cybersecurity concept itself was not in head. So many security controls and security things are not available also. So under these circumstances, one of the options that is available is, to study these OT devices and ensure that we are having separate networks for these things. Wherever there is a connectivity requirement that is required, those are the connectivity requirements that we need to provide. Other than that, we must not give the complete open connectivity.
Exactly.
And second important point is access control wise also, we must not, for example, if you see, if you enter into the system, what will happen? You have complete access to the entire network. That is the kind of environment available earlier. What we need to do is that we need to come out of that and see that whatever minimum access is required, only that minimum access must be given. So these are the kinds of steps we need to put in place to protect the systems. So though the device currently is not completely upgraded, at least the environment where it is put in, at least going to give it some protection so that we have the assurance.
Excellent. You sort of hit the nail on the head. I remember about a couple of months back, a similar panel discussion in Delhi with manufacturing companies and even large companies. I can even name Maruti and Pepsi. Even they were telling in the operational environment, they are still using Windows NT. And that migration, now Microsoft has stopped Windows NT.
Correct.
So there is no support from Microsoft. So that is, and so there also the recommendation came that separating the IT network and the OT network. Excellent suggestion. I'll come to you, Mr. Manik Paul from Vikram Solar. Again, these sensors are there, they are generating a lot of data, humongous amount of data. And once this humongous amount of data is being generated, how do you effectively maintain high levels of security from the production and operational environment? How do you ensure that?
Good afternoon, everybody. I think this is a big challenge. The OT security, I personally feel it's a big challenge, and I think we have to go for a long path. You know, we are trying a lot of things. I think Kripaditya talked about, and he talked about separate VLAN, differentiating IT. I think the biggest challenge, of course, is, you know, something of the awareness, because you are dealing with a separate set of people, you know, who are not used to all this IT security awareness, where they need to think about device security, IT security, you know, system security, network security, user access management, you know, login, everything, you know, so they need to handle everything. Now, coming back to your question, that how are you managing all this data? So, all our, you know, the machines, they have edge devices where all the data are stored in the same LAN, but a different virtual LAN. And then those softwares, you know, there is a edge computers, you know, the softwares are again filtered, and only the meaningful data is transferred to cloud for a separate analysis of data. And there is a separate mechanism where the vendor is assisting us in, you know, purging all those unmeaningful data from the system. So it's all inbuilt as a part of the application layer, which has been developed by the person who has given us the machine, and also the application layer. You know, as of now, this is a black box for us, for all the CIOs, I think. We have at least I can tell you that I have a very limited knowledge on all this SCADA related softwares. And at Vikram Solar, if I see, in the manufacturing side, you know, you have, you know, stringer machine coming from a Chinese company, the laminator coming from a Swedish company. So you have to deal with several vendors. And to convince them that you have to follow these IT security guideline and the IT policies, and also to explain those policies to the soft floor people. It's a big challenge, you know, those people, and our processes are also like that, you know, it's fully integrated with, so we capture a lot of data directly from, there is a machine called Sun Simulator. So it gives, when you finally manufacture a module, do a flash test. So all the IV curve data, you know, all input parameters, what is the current, what is the voltage, and what is the watt peak of the total module, you know, all those are captured, and then SAP takes a decision based on some rules and logics, that it decide that what parameter can be a B grade, which is like our quality grade. And so all these decisions are, coming from the data which you are capturing for the machines. So, so it's fully integrated. So to convince them and come into an agreement that they also have to follow all the security guidelines is a big challenge for us. And we are gradually overcoming. The other challenge, other side of our business is O&M business, operation and maintenance business, which is, where we are setting up a power plant, and it is also connected to SLDC, state level distribution center, where the, SLDCs, the state level SLDCs, they connect to our power plant and also capture all the power generation data. So there also the SCADA data are connected to a local LAN, and then there is a OPC server. And again, the SCADA software is given by Greenwave, Siemens, and there are different companies.
Okay.
And they've got different protocols. So it's a big challenge, but we are following, we have some policies which we have framed out, and we are following those.
Okay, so the importance of defined business processes and policies and SOPs maybe. I'll come back to Mr. R.N. Patra. Coal India, as we know, is one of the largest PSUs with almost all the coal mines across the country operating under it. So, and being a PSU, obviously there is still a large amount of legacy things still around. So, it's interesting to know how from a PSU perspective, this shift when we are talking about IT and OT security, from a predominantly legacy environment, what are the challenges still remains, and how are you sort of transitioning from that legacy to the next gen?
Yeah, it is a very good question. Of course, not in only Coal India, in most of the old organizations, a lot of systems are from legacy systems are there. When you are transiting from this to a IT environment or something like that, so you have to take care of the legacy systems. In that case where legacy systems are there and you have to put it on IT and OT environment, so first you have to think of that all the data should be transmitted through a secure channel. Either it may be a private MPLS or maybe a private, you can say, networking, so that securing the channel will give you a protection from the data should not go out of your control. The second point is for the legacy systems where the IT or sensors have been put, of course, there are so many challenges, but still that can be managed with a policy, and you can say role-based systems, integration with the new IT systems that can be managed, and it can be also transformed to a digital platform. So, and for any new projects or any new digitations coming up, so in that case, of course, you can plan accordingly so that all this IT and OT should be on the same environment, should be on better handshaking mode and all these things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kripadutti Sharkar, I'll put this almost the same question, obviously not from the PSU perspective, but the legacy transition is equally relevant for even the private organizations. So when we are shifting from legacy to this next gen, from an OT security perspective, what are the main challenges that today you are facing other than that cultural thing, or the shop floor you mentioned? Other than that?
Primarily the major challenge, as you already stated, and he also mentioned that the systems are varied. I mean, they are based on the priority of the shop floor. They actually put something very old system where there is no care. There are some systems are very relevant and very new where they need most of the output. So therefore, based on that, from my stand view or from the organization stand view on the IT policy treated all the OT in the same language. So they do not have any priority, because security does not care about the how it is being utilized. So that's the main challenge, because from business angle of the perspective, they see a OT device on their perspective of the output or throughput. And we see from the security, and vulnerability can even in a smallest hole, not even in a window shield, it can be on a false ceiling. So therefore, for me, it's entirely 100% is my periphery, and for them, based on their priority. So that's a major challenge, where upgrading something, upgrading the patch, upgrading the any of the monitoring utility on a not so relevant from the revenue perspective device is a challenge. And second challenge is the distributive nature of the workplace, because in Ambuja Annuitia we have a real estate business, we have a hospitality business, and we have a healthcare. So in a real estate, so the most of the places are very remote. So my SCADA, all the machines are actually placed in a barren land. So because whenever the construction happens, it's a barren. So after construction, it's actually very much utilized by either mall or hospital or the hospitality, hotels like that. So therefore, making a network with secured network, because extending, we are always segregating those sites from our main network. But anyhow, we have to establish a security protocol everywhere. So that needs an investment, and that investment does not have any ROI, because after 2 to 3 years, that site will be changed. So therefore, again, reusability, how we can best utilize the devices, again, network policy, how can be implemented, who will going to monitor, because since it's a remote from the HO, so IT cannot directly monitor all the threats and every time. So those are the primarily challenges. So anyhow, we are now bridging that, keeping a representative from IT every places where it is monitored. Because we know that the threat that we understand in our eyes is not a similar understanding the person from the project or the person from the shop floor can have the same eye. Because they only see the log, and when a log is actually red, they say that there is something red. But we also know that some yellow can also potential to be red, and even larger, deep, dark red.
Okay, thanks. Sriram, I'll come to you. You have already mentioned the one important recommendation about separating the two networks. But beyond that, I would like to say, still, if we see roughly, some survey says IoT deployments, when you are talking about, half of them are still not successful happening when a lot of these sensors are being put in. Other than the challenges that you mentioned, what else is causing these failures, according to you?
See, one of the most important things is, first of all, he has mentioned that point, that Q he has given, the distributive nature of these assets.
Okay.
So these assets are distributed across. The first thing that is happening is that I do not know how many assets I have, where they are.
Okay.
So that is first fundamental thing. Then second thing is, okay, I know the assets where they are. Now, am I able to understand how they are connected and what kind of a workflow is available to them? That is another challenge that we have. And thirdly, when I'm controlling, what kind of control that I'm giving, that actually if it changes, it has a catastrophic impact on the operations. So that is another challenge, that where people fear, to make any changes or to come forward to make any changes. That is a third kind of a challenge that, people, always they feel about. And with respect to the cybersecurity, if you see there, the challenge that you see is, the identifying what kind of an exposure it gives.
Exactly.
So that actually, that is something should not be, a self-judgment. We should try to rely on, people who are experts. Ask them to come and review the environment and see the flows, and then identify why, what are the gaps in my system, so that whenever I'm deploying anything, so it really works or it doesn't break. So that kind of an assessment is also very, very important. That realization comes, as it is like right now we are in the faltering steps. So as the maturity, or as we get more failures, we learn from those failures and then start learning them. So how the industry is now doing is that they're actually failing somewhere, they're understanding the reasons for the failure, trying to learn from those failures, and then trying to recover and then implement the new things. So, but what will happen, this will not go. This will improve the maturity. On the positive side, if you say, this will improve the maturity of the understanding of the subject. and then thereby slowly the failure rates will come down. So that is the positive side I want to mention here.
Okay.
One point to add, he has rightly mentioned, and also in our HO or other in IT systems, we have we can create a prototype, putting a network down and putting a other VLAN. But in the production system,
Obviously.
so it's only production. There is no development quality, only production. So single instance, we have to do all the testing, VOT,
Just can't stop
Correct.
production.
So that's the major challenge we are facing, because even if we identify the patch, it is very, very hard to take a call, yes, put it there.
And one last thing I want to say is that people are mostly, means when any device you are procuring, people have a tendency to do only the positive testing. They never do the complete coverage of testing. Negative testing is never there. That is one another reason why many of the devices, though they work, but eventually they fail because you have not done the negative testing.
Okay, great. Ms. Manik Paul, we heard about this maturity curve where we are, and then a lot of organizations are trying to look at third-party solution providers. But my question is, especially in the Indian scenario, how many third-party solution providers themselves are mature enough to provide advice on this? Yeah, on the IT front, we know obviously there are a dime a dozen solution providers with enough maturity, but the OT security part, I know some of the security vendors are providing now, but really, what is the real scenario in the Indian context?
I think it's still evolving, and everybody is, even the vendor and we are all the customers, so we all are working together. So for Vikram Solar, what we are trying to do is that for all these O&M sites, which Kripaditya says are all very remote, like we've got about 20 O&M sites, which are very remotely, they are all remote and it's very difficult to maintain. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to work out and working with different vendors, and we are working on a centralized asset management system, wherein the east side, the SCADA will be connected to a centralized server, and you'll be able to manage this entire operations of these O&M sites centrally sitting, and there will be a central ticketing system, there will be a central support system. All your MTTR, MTBF report will be, can be managed, live managed. You can have a digital twin, you can find out what is the generation which you're making. So all these things we are working on a solution is almost finalized, and based on that we are also actually developing our GTM. And there is a separate company is being formed called BP Utilities Limited, so they will be taking care of the O&M business for different other solar module, EPC-based companies. Okay. So that's one area which we are currently working, and we are looking at all kind of security, that what ports should be open, how do we connect the SLDC, what kind of security protocol we will have, and what kind of, whether it's a POFINet, BACnet, and what kind of protocol through which we capture the data on a central server, what frequency it will come, what kind of security. He's talked about MPLS, IPsec, and also the data traveling on an encryption mode. So these all aspects which are looking at present, and we are working with various vendors. I am telling you, there are vendors, some of them are given very good cybersecurity solutions. And we have found out some vendors, and they have done good work. One of the vendor which you talked of, very startup companies called Energio, they have developed this kind of solution, which is secure solutions with multiple layer of security. And their solutions is also very modular. They have developed a solution for solar, for wind energy, and with all kind of securities inbuilt.
Okay, great. So just like the previous panel discussions, very brief rapid fire kind of thing, 30 seconds to each panelist, starting with Mr. Patra again in that sequence. On the OT front, one action which is planned in the next 5-6 quarters.
To my previous answers, just I am adding one more thing in case of the legacy systems, what you told at that time. In legacy systems, the operational procedure and process are tested. So we know where is the failure points and where are the vulnerable points. So accordingly, you have to deploy the IT equipments. So in OT environment, from the point of view of the security, there are 3 steps has to be followed. One is isolation, second is orchestration, third is the rapid recovery system in case of any attacks. These 3 has to be kept in mind. You have to plan your IT and OT deployments so that if in case, you cannot say that your system is 100% safe. If in case any attacks comes, you have to recover from the attacks with a very short time without affecting your business process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sharkar.
2 priorities. First priority is the bringing all the OT devices into standard platform, because right now we have various versions on the firmware, software, and the OS. That's the first priority. And second priority, to implement the single policy for the all locations, all devices, a single policy to monitor and implement the security of that. These are the 2 things.
Sriram.
Yeah, I'm not repeating because we do have the same thing in our plate. I'm going to add to that. Our goal is actually, in the next 2 years, we must become a cyber security resilient, system we should become. To do that, the first thing that we have identified is a common policy must be there. And second thing is people, process. These 2 things are very, very important. Awareness must be built to the people. That is a fundamental thing. We are also trying to conduct certain mock drills as well as blue teams and the red teams concept we are introducing, so that we are actually preparing the people how they face these events and then how they react, so that how quickly we can come out. That kind of an exercise we need to give it to them. So we are planning for the drills so that we truly become the resilient system.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manik Paul, you have the last word.
Yeah, so the 2 things which I have formed a dedicated team of 2 persons, and we have told our organization that right from the tendering process they have to involve IT. So if they are designing any structure, IT network structure, they have to come through IT. So all this IP range and everything has to depend with them. So that control which you have taken. Second thing which we are doing is that we are focusing now on asset management. So the centralized asset management, we know that where are all the OT assets located and how many OT assets are working and how many OT assets are not working. The third thing, which is very important for us, the awareness training. So we have taken a 15 minutes dedicated time slot for every open floor that we organize in the company for IT security awareness.
Okay, that's great to know. Great, thanks. We would conclude the panel discussion here. Before finishing, I'll request Souvik to hand over a token of appreciation to all the panelists. Can we have the tokens? Mr. Manik Paul. Mr. R.N. Patro. Mr. Kripaduti Sarkar. Mr. Sriram Chavali. I would request all the panelists to